Hey guys, Ken here. Hey, I mentioned in class that I was going to have some video tutorials for you. The first one is going to be the one I'm working on right now, which is defining a site. Now we've kind of touched on this in class when we opened up Dreamweaver, but I want to go into a little bit more detail. I want to give you a little bit better idea of what is available to you. I also would like to kind of go over the basics of Dreamweaver. I know most of you have played with it. I'm not sure if everybody has played around with Dreamweaver, but for the most part, it's I can't assume that everybody knows the menu system and how Dreamweaver works. Okay, so if you haven't yet, go ahead and open up Dreamweaver and pause the video if you need to. But if you've already got it open, you should have something like this. Now, I'm working with CC 2018, which is, I think, one version. It could be two, because I think there's a 2019, CC 2019, and then there's a CC 2020. And I think 2020 is in the lab. So there could be two versions off. So understand that there might be some differences. You might see some different things that on my screen that maybe you don't have. Everything should be there. So don't get discouraged. Just stop the video and look around for it. It might be in a little bit different place. It might be called something a little bit different. But with only two version difference, I don't think you're going to run into any problems. Okay, so what we need to do is you probably got a splash screen that first showed up. I think that's the standard. Is there's this window? It's called like the home page or something. If you did get that, go ahead and try to close it out. It might be an X up in the upper left corner, or it could be cancel down in the lower right corner. Somewhere there's probably going to give you an option to close it out. What we first want to do is we want to have our workspace to be the same. So if you go up to the menu bar, now this first menu, the light gray that you see on my screen, that's called the menu bar. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a few minutes, but what we need to do is to go up to Window, go down to Workspace, and choose Standard. This should be the default, but there's always the possibility that somebody has Developer chosen. Go ahead and choose Standard. Now, if it is different, you might want something like Essentials. That's only if Standard isn't there. If Standard is there, choose Standard. I'm going to choose this. And now I need to go back up to the menu bar and reset our workspace. So it kind of goes back to the default settings. So we're going to go back up to Window, to Workspace, Reset Standard. All right, so I'm assuming that everybody has this window. It should be very similar, if not exact. Okay, now let's talk about the workspace. Right now, we don't have a file that's open, and I'm going to talk about the design view and the code view in a couple minutes once we open up we create a new page. Right now, this is blank. It will have something in it in a little bit. Now, the menu bar, which we just used to choose the workspace and reset it, is probably the most important menu system in almost every application that you use. It's not just Adobe that has the menu bar. I think almost every application that has a lot of options will use the menu bar. And what the menu bar has is everything, and I say everything to mean everything that you will need in the application. For example, you'll see you have all this other windows and toolbars and stuff like that, but all of these usually can be accessed from the menu bar. Plus, the menu bar has other things. Let's just go to File for just a second. we look at file, you can see new, open, open recent. You see close, close all, save, save as, save all. And you can see that the amount of options that you have under just how you save a file is, there's probably 25 things that you can do with it. Now, you can't find those options anywhere else except the menu bar. If you go to edit, you'll notice that you have all these other options and view. Now, some of these options are in the menus that you have on the screen, but what I want you to remember is if you need anything, and that includes you have to force quit the program for whatever reason, it's going to be in the menu bar. When I talked about force quit, there is always a possibility, and it used to happen, not very often, but occasionally, Dreamweaver would get stuck. And they call it the beach ball of death. And it's got different colors and it just spins. It just spins and spins and spins and spins, and it never stops spinning. When that happens, you'll have to force quit. So what you would do is go up to the apple in the menu bar, click on it, choose force quit, and you'll get a dialog box that opens up, and then you can just choose to force quit it. Now, if you do that, you will lose all the information in whatever application that you worked on from the last time you saved. So it's not something that you want to do without understanding that, say you worked 4 hours and you haven't saved anything. That means that 4 hours of work that you've done is now gone. There's nothing that you do. If you force quit it, it's over. So if there's a chance, and sometimes if you get the beach ball of death, again, it looks like a beach ball that just spins and spins and spins, you might want to let that beach ball just keep spinning. There's always a possibility. It's very slim, but there's always a possibility that it will correct itself. Don't choose force quit too quick. But if you have to, this is the avenue that you would go. I'm going to close this out because obviously I don't need to force quit this. On the other side, I should mention that I have used Dreamweaver for weeks without having any problems at all. It just matters on your computer system. It matters on what you're trying to edit or trying to create in Dreamweaver. Most of the time, Dreamweaver is pretty good, but once you start getting into a more complicated design, there's always a possibility that you're going to have to worry about force quitting the application. All right, the next thing is let's just talk about the basic workspace. Now, some of these things are obvious. The green button up here, the minus, and the close window. But then we have other objects. You'll see that the toolbar is right here. Now, the toolbar, I don't know. We never used to have it in Dreamweaver for the longest time. I don't use it that often, but chances are because the toolbar's here, you're going to be using it more often than, say, I typically do. One of the things that you need to know is all the windows can be moved. So you should see some dots here. And if you click, you should be able to drag it to any location that you want. Now, I'm far enough from the screen that it's hard for me to see those dots, but there should be, I don't know, there's 4 or 5 dots here. If I click on those, I can drag this anywhere. Now, if I want to lodge it into a certain area, I'll move it until I see a blue line. Do you see the blue line right on the left-hand side of the screen? When I do that, when you see the blue line, that means that I can attach it to where that blue line is. And now it's attached. If I want to move it again, I can move it over here, and when I take it over, you see the blue line? I can attach it to these windows. I can also move it further over, if I can get those. Say I attach it here, I can attach it on this side. Now, for the most part, you're probably pretty much not going to want to move the windows around in the beginning. At some point though, you might say, well, I want this window to be over here. And maybe I want the library's window to be here. If I want to put those back, notice how when I put this, the blue line comes. That means that it's saying I want to attach this. So I'm going to put up and I'll attach these two together. And I'll move it up into this upper left corner. Again, you make that decision. Right now I'm just showing you what you can do. If a window is getting in your way, you want to move it, you can do that. If it feels awkward where it currently is located, you can switch it. Now let's come over to the option windows. And I call these the option windows mainly out of habit. But what these are is they give you options to do certain tasks. You'll notice that they're pretty standardized. You have the greater than arrows at the upper right corner. And basically it's collapse. If I do something like this, it's going to make the menu system collapse a little bit. If I want to open it back up, it's the same location. It'll change to a less than arrows, and it opens back up. Underneath these, you will see these. It's called a hamburger menu. Now, technically, this hamburger menu is 3 horizontal lines. I don't think that this is 3. I think it's 4. So technically, it may not be a hamburger menu. But if you click on it, you will get more options. Now, I'm not sure if you can see that. So I'm going to pull this menu over, go back over to this, click on it, and you'll see that I have more options here. If I want to close this out, I'll close it out. If I want to switch, say I'm in CSS Designer and I want to insert something, I'm going to click on this tab and that's going to bring that window to the foreground. And whichever one is highlighted is the one that I'm going to be working in. Got assets, snippets. So for example, say we want to insert an image. We don't have a page open right now, so we can't really insert an image into a blank document or no document. So it's grayed out, but then you could just click div or image. If you want to change the workspace at any point, you can come up here and change the workspace. You can also save the workspace that you're working on if you want. For the most part, I don't mess with this too much. Usually when you open up Dreamweaver, it's the same setup that you had when you closed it. And if you're using your own computer, that's pretty much what you want. You don't really want to go back to the standard or developer or something like that. If you're using a community computer, then maybe you want to save your setup so that you could, go back to where you were when you quit. All right, toolbar. Toolbar has a lot of the options that you'll probably need at some point. Now, we don't get a lot of options here because we don't have a document that's open. And in all honesty, this was not something that was used. This is a new menu bar in the last probably 2-3 versions. So most people that know Dreamweaver, have known Dreamweaver for a while, wouldn't use this. We have other ways to get around. But if at some point you want to add something, say you want to, let's see, what's something we could add in, just in case you didn't see this 3 dots down at the bottom, you can customize and say, let's do recent snippets, and that's going to add it here when I hit done. And now we have recent snippets. Again, this is relatively new. You may never need it. I never needed it, but if you do, it's there. Okay, I think I covered everything to do with the workspace. The menu bar is the most important. The option windows over here, these windows are going to be very important when you start actually working. The toolbar, I don't see that it's that important, but it may become useful to you if you decide to use it. Mostly what we're going to be doing is either here or up in the insert or view. All right, so let's define a site. So defining a site can be kind of complicated. I mean, the idea behind it is pretty simple. The explaining it can be kind of difficult. The basic idea is that your server needs to know where all the files and where all the objects that are included in a web page are stored. Right? It makes sense. If somebody goes to look for a history page, right? They go to the server and they're looking for history.html. Now, on that history page, there might be images. There might be a CSS file. There could be all sorts of things that the server needs to know that location. For example, say you in Dreamweaver, you told the server that image was going to be an image folder, right? That say history1.jpg is in an images folder. Your server needs to know that, okay? And because the code is going to say specifically that history.jpg is in the images folder, you need to make sure that you have an images folder and that the history.jpg is in that folder. The code is going to tell the server where everything is. So you need to make sure that you define the locations that you're working on specifically and correctly. And that's part of what defining a site will help you do. Now there's more to it. When you actually upload the site, you need to make sure that the file structures, the folder structures, everything is the same as what's on the local machine, your personal computer. But our first step in doing this correctly is managing a site in Dreamweaver, okay? So again, our purpose in managing a site is to guarantee that when we upload the site, that the server will understand where we're locating specific items. Okay, when we actually get to upload a site, you'll see usually one or two students will have images that don't show up. They'll have certain issues, and it's because their file structure isn't correct. For now, we're going to just take the Dreamweaver side. When we do upload, we'll deal with any problems that are on the server. Okay? I hope that made sense. It is a little bit complicated describing it. It's very simple in theory. So let's go up into the menu bar, go to Site, and let's do New Site. Now before we go to New Site, notice that it has Manage Sites. You would manage a site anytime you change computers. Remember, we need to tell Dreamweaver exactly where the files are, the folder structure, everything about that. Dreamweaver needs to know to ensure that when we upload the site that everything is correct, that they can find images, and Dreamweaver can find, or the server can find all the things that we were using in Dreamweaver. So, for example, say you're working on your site at home, and you do a new site, right? And you do everything right, everything is perfect, and then you come to school and you decide to use one of the lab computers. Well, before you start working, you need to manage sites. You need to go up and choose Manage Sites and define where that folder is. That folder that you're using on your computer. You need to tell Dreamweaver where to go to find all the files that it's going to need. You'll get a lot of different errors if you don't manage sites. Now, because we don't have any sites to manage right now, what we need to worry about is creating a new site. So I'm going to go to New Site, move this up here, and I'm just going to create a site name. Now this is a descriptive name, doesn't really mean anything. What it's going to, you're going to see it in Dreamweaver by choosing the name. Like for example, say you were working on the Peru website, you would probably put Peru website. It's whatever name you want to call it. I'm going to call it Dreamweaver. I'm going to tell it where it's going to be stored. Where are all the files? The index page, the contact page, the CSS style sheets. Where are all these files going to be kept? Well, now we need to tell Dreamweaver where we're going to do that. I'm going to do it to the desktop. I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this Dreamweaver. I'm just going to do Dreamweaver Tuts. Okay? Basically means Dreamweaver tutorials. And again, this is a folder on your computer, and this does not go to the server if we were to upload. So I'm going to hit create. I'm going to hit choose. And this part is good. This is all done. We don't have to deal with this anymore. Now there are some other options that most of you won't be dealing with. There is a website called GitHub. And what GitHub is think of coding where you work. If you were a programmer, you could work with other programmers on a project. The best way to do that is to have like an area where you can all work on one project, and that's what GitHub is. If this website was dealing with more people than say just you, and you wanted to allow other people to use it, you could get an account at GitHub, and then you could like tell all your friends the information so they could log in and they could edit a page and things like that. We're not going to do that. It's not that important. Okay. We could go to servers, and we could add a server in here. Now, this is the, I think, third attempt at doing a video. The other two, I actually went through this, but as I was rewatching it, I decided that you don't really need to know this right now. I think it would be better if we waited until I talked about uploading your website to a server. So we're going to hold off on that. This is important information, but for now, I think it's just going to complicate stuff. I'm going to go to CSS preprocessors. You really don't need to do this right now. Basically what this does is it allows pre-processing of CSS styles. CSS, cascading style sheets, are getting very large. They're getting larger than the HTML pages. And because of that, it takes longer to parse the information. And parse just means that to understand what the CSS is trying to get it to do. So if you have a preprocessor on CSS, it kind of instructs the browser how to understand it a little bit quicker. Okay? And we're not going to be doing anything complicated, but it is common now in most large websites to have some sort of preprocessor. For our purposes, it's not necessary. And then the other window is advanced settings, and I think I had you guys do this before. We're going to go into local info, and remember, whenever we say local, it means our own computer. What we're working on right here, this is local, as opposed to the server. I'm going to click here, and we need to tell Dreamweaver where we're going to store the images. So click on Browse for Folder. It should take us automatically to the folder that we created. I'm going to do New Folder, and I'm going to call it Images. Now, I talked about this in class. Over time, there are certain traditions, certain things that designers have learned to do. And one of them is to call an image folder Images. Now, most of you will, when you first start out, you'll want to call it Photographs or Image or something that makes more sense to you. Understand that there are a lot of websites that other people will manage. For example, you might build a page and have somebody else manage it. That person that's going to manage it will look for an images folder. If you don't have it, they don't know where you're storing the major images for your website. So it's a standardized procedure. You need to name the folder Images, okay? It seems kind of strange, I know, but it's kind of a requirement. So go ahead and create. Hit choose. And all of these basically do the same thing. It's like, where are you storing your web fonts? Where are you storing your jQuery, your templates, your PHP? All of these things is basically telling Dreamweaver where you're storing it, where you're going to be working with it. Now, I went through this earlier before on another video, and again, I don't really think that it's that useful to get into this because, except for the images folder and maybe the CSS folder, I don't really see that it's that important. You generally will figure it out after you've been using Dreamweaver for a while. Trust me, it gets complicated at a certain point and you'll just say, well, I just need a new folder or whatever. Go ahead and hit save. Now if we go to our local files over on the option windows, you'll see where it says Site and then Images, the folder that we created. We don't have any pages in here, so we don't see anything, and we don't have any images in the folder either. Let's just take this one more step before I end this video. Let's create a page. This will kind of allow me to talk about the two different views that you have to finish off talking about the workspace, and then we can kind of see how everything kind of lays out. So I'm going to go to File, New. I'm going to choose HTML, but you see all of the options that you have. If you were working with PHP, which is a server-side language, you would choose this. Less and SCSS and SAS all have to do with the preprocessors that we talked about and when we were defining the site. You won't be using these right now, but you will find, if you get into web design, there are some CSSs that are compressed, and you need a preprocessor to uncompress them. For our purposes, for this class, for this course, is not to get in this depth. I mean, I don't really use these at all. If I have a choice between regular uncompressed CSS, cascading style sheets, or using less or SAS, I choose the uncompressed. It's just easier to read. It's not as difficult to use. So, but if you were working on JavaScript or something, or JSON, XML, scalable vector graphic, HTML template, all the different things that are available to you. You also know that you have starter templates. Don't use these, okay? When you're learning, it's better to figure things out on your own. It's better to struggle and try to figure out how they do certain things than to let somebody else do the rough work. And the reason why they have templates is because part of it, of creating this layout that you see right here, is tough. It's not easy, but you just gotta kind of work through it, and you gotta understand what it is you're doing. Some people, it'll take them, an hour, 2 hours to figure out certain things. Other people, it'll take 6 hours or 7 hours. But that learning process is what you're going after. Choosing a template is just never a good idea, in my opinion. And you can see site templates. There's no items in this, so. All right, so let's go up to new document. And we talked about this in class. I can actually pick an HTML page. Let's go over to Bootstrap. We're not going to do Bootstrap. Bootstrap is one of the things that I use consistently. In fact, I choose to use Bootstrap other than, say, Dreamweaver. And even though Dreamweaver works with Bootstrap, it's almost easier not to use Dreamweaver when you use Bootstrap. Okay? You can see you can create new pre-built layout, customize, all of these things. I'm not even going to talk about it because it's not important. You won't be using Bootstrap. I will be talking about Bootstrap later on in the semester, but I'm not going to force you to build a site with Bootstrap. So I'm going to go to none. I'm going to create, what's the title of our first site? Let's say this is the first page of my site. Okay, you can name it anything that you want. Like we talked about this in class before as well. But basically, you can choose any one of these, and what this does, and it doesn't limit it. For example, if I choose HTML strict, HTML 4.01 strict, if you have elements from a different version of HTML, it doesn't mean that it's going to fail when the browser parses it. It just means this is the goal that you have. Now, I always kind of like to go down one version. We're currently in HTML5 right now. It's just my own personal opinion to use 4.01 transitional. The transitional is a looser interpretation of HTML. It basically tells the browser that my web page may kind of contain some of HTML5, and it may contain some of 4.01. It may have some XML in it, XHTML. So that's why I use the transitional. You could choose HTML5. I don't think that you would have any problems at all if you chose HTML5. You might run into some problems if you chose the strict, or if you chose XHTML. But I'm going to pick HTML 4.01 transitional. Now, to be clear, I want to make sure what you are telling the browser, the reason why we choose this, we pick the language, is to tell the browser what we are working with. So if there's ever a conflict between certain languages, say in one language what you told the browser to do, your code says to do one thing, and in another language it tells it to do something different, the browser will use what you decide. And in this case, we're telling it 4.01 transitional. We're informing the browser our intention of our code. Okay? I hope that makes sense. It's important that you put this in. What you decide to put in will be up to you. I would go for the 4.01 transitional or HTML5. Either one, this one or HTML5. Go ahead and hit create. And now we have the rest of our workspace is completed. On the left side over here, we have our code. See, we have the doc type is HTML, HTML 4.01 transitional, and this tells where to find information about that. If there's any question or anything and the browser needs to gather information, then they would probably use this link. And we have our skeleton. We have the HTML head, the meta, right? This character set means that it is international language. Back in the day, in fact, you probably see it in certain websites. Some letters, maybe even you can't tell what it is. You'll just see kind of some numbers with a little square. Basically, it means that the browser doesn't understand the language that is on the web page. Over time, the international characters set changed to UTF-8, and I remember it was probably about 2005, 2006. Every website had to kind of change over because a lot of browsers weren't displaying the content. If you had quotation marks, they were showing up as blanks. There were all sorts of different problems that we ran into. So you need to make sure that the character set is set. Now, it doesn't have to be UTF-8, but for English-speaking sites, it needs to be UTF-8. If, for example, say you were working with Cyrillic languages or Arabic languages, then it would be something other. I'm not sure what the code is for that, but for English, you want UTF, which is Universal. Can't remember what it's called. Something format. Okay, and then we see here's the title of the page that we put in when we created the page, and we close the head off, and we start the body. Okay. Now, we've gone over this before. Hopefully that looks familiar. I'm pretty sure everybody kind of gets this. And that's why we did it before, is so that you had some introduction to it. Now, we're not going to get into building anything right now. That will be the next video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this video and try to get this online. And hopefully it'll make sense. There was a couple of areas that I stumbled on. I hope that if you have any questions or anything that didn't make sense, let me know, okay? Ask questions. And the best way is to ask questions in the comments area on YouTube. All the videos are going to be on YouTube, and I'll give you the location in class. The reason why I want the comments on YouTube is because there's a good possibility. This can be a complicated subject, and if you have a question about something, there's a good possibility that there's another student that has that same question, and they may not even know that they didn't catch it. You know, you might say, well, I don't understand about the server versus the local files. And they may go, yeah, that's right. I don't know what he was saying. So if you ask the question and I answer it in the comments, then, you know, there's a good possibility somebody's going to learn what they didn't even know they needed to learn. Okay? I hope that made sense. All right, I'm going to end this video. Thank you, guys. I hope it made sense, and hope to get this up later on this afternoon. Thank you. Bye.